Take went down to the shore, where the docks creaked above slow churning waters, as cold and gray as cunning storms. He knew the path well, every bush and tree. When the breeze blew and salt touched his tongue, he knew to leave the path and cut through the line of trees, whose bodies were twisted and worn from time. Take would step out to find his favorite place upon the shore, pebbled with slippery rocks and lonely, save the sounds of waves and gulls. He was a sailor and rejoiced when it was just him and the sea. Take stepped out of the trees, a smile on his broad tan face. He took all the same procedures, went down the same path, and brought with him all the same tools to catch fish, should he desire. Everything should have been the same, but it wasn't. Lying on the beach of rocks was a man, shirtless and still. His secret place was not hard to find, but it remained his all the same. He looked at the strange visitor, who stirred and shuddered, skin pale and wet. The man lifted his body, strong arms heaving his torso up so he could cough water onto the rocks. His chin glistened with his spit. He used one hand to wipe clean his plush lips. That's when he looked up through his veil of sapphire spun hair, which shined under the high sun as if it had diamonds caught in it, instead of the murky sea water. Take's breath caught. The man met his gaze and froze. His eyes were paler than his hair, a sharp, crisp blue like a chunk of sky had caught in his eyes. The man lowered himself, eyes watching him carefully. Without words, he waited. The man was beautiful. That's when Take saw it, the full body of this man. His gaze broke to travel his body. His naked torso, lean and slim, gave way to scales of blue and green that started just above his hips. The scales flowed over the humps of his rear and covered two large legs, affixed with translucent fins that reminded him of ribbons, and others that stood straight and looked sharp to the touch. Take continued down to his feet, where his webbed toes looked more like claws. He was bigger than he first thought. His long legs stretched out into the water. He had to be at least 8 feet and stronger than any sailor. Take met the man's eyes again. His pale oval face was framed by his wet hair clinging to it. He looked into his eyes and realized this was no man, but something from myth and lore. This man from the sea could bring him fame, fortune, and possibly immortality. The man's gaze hardened as if he knew this too. His head spun and throbbed when he came to. Aregithus cursed the chemicals in the man-made devices that corrupted his sea. The smell of the ocean surrounded him, but land lay underneath him. Light pierced his eyes as he opened them to the world and spilled the water he had swallowed. He coughed and shook as his body rejected the forced entry of the salty water. He sat up and wiped his hand across his mouth. He was relieved he had not been tangled in a net. Aregithus would have smiled, but he looked up only to see a human man, standing but several feet away. He was tall, tanned from days in the sun, with dark hair and eyes, and the scent of the sea on him. At his side was a rod and knife, a fisherman perhaps. The human was fixated on Aregithus, enraptured, even though he had yet to hear his voice's song. Despair weighed his heart, but it was soon taken by anger, his ire for mankind and the foolishness of their ways. He could have broken the man's neck with one sweep of his leg. Aregithus watched as the man discovered his true nature. Unable to hide his surprise, he watched the human's lips part in awe. His dark eyes were like mirrors, big and full of wonder. But no human soul could be quite so innocent. Without a word, the man finally moved. He took one step forward, then another. drawing the large knife he had hooked at his side into his right hand. He dropped his rod and kept his knife clenched tight. Aregothes waited for him to come closer, close enough that it would be the man that could not escape. But the human walked without hesitation, dark eyes strong. It should have been him that was fixated, but instead Aregothes could not turn his eyes away from the man's. As he drew closer, he could smell the sweat on his skin, the heat of the sun on his flesh, and the smell of salt-bearing winds and fish on him. He had known many days on the sea. The man stopped just in front of him and lowered himself, getting on one knee. Aregothes raised his body, never looking away as the human raised his knife. The blade caught the sun, glinted in the light like a metallic tooth, sharp and deadly. The man did not speak, nor did Aregothes. The man's eyes kept his claws from ripping out his neck. His dark gaze held his legs, kept him from crushing every bone in his body with a mighty blow. He expected to see greed, but all that filled his eyes was a longing and deep sadness. With his hand raised, the man loosened his fingers and let the knife slip from his grasp, to fall on the rocky shore. The human leaned forward, as silent as he had come, and pressed rough lips to his. His lips may have scratched at the softness of his own, but the human's touch was gentle. They kissed, and Aregothes did not stop him. Only when he pulled back and stood up did Aregothes blink. He waited till the man stepped back again, his dark eyes filled with a look he could not read. After a moment, Aregothes turned his back. He did not glance behind him as he pushed towards the cold waters that lapped at the shore. The ocean swallowed his body, and he left the man behind, swimming back out once more.